Hi, this is another episode of Treasure Valley Quick Tips podcast. And what it is I'm a franchise owner of a network and action franchise. And it's a once a month professional referral groups. We do brainstorming in them too. I bought it over 6 years ago. And through that, um, a high percentage of the people groups are local, high caliber business professionals, and I just bring them on the show to share their expertise. And today's a perfect example and a topic that everybody needs to be listening for because this is critical for any business. So, Kristen, introduce yourself.
Good morning, Scott, and thank you for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity. My name's Kristin Hamilton. I'm one of the owners of Dutch Sisters Bookkeeping, and I am Dutch, and my sister happens to be my partner. That's legit. And if you're thinking coffee, that makes a lot of sense too, because as someone who does a lot of bookkeeping, I drink a ton of coffee. But I've been doing bookkeeping in one form or another for about 20 years.
Wow.
I know it's a long time, but I feel like I'm just getting started, which is good. If I've also been doing a lot of taxes over the last 8 seasons, I've done probably about 2,500 tax returns
Wow.
overall, individual and business. I'm an enrolled agent, so when it comes to dealing with the IRS, I can do everything a CPA can do. And I think that kind of gives me an advantage because I'm always keeping taxes in the back of my mind while I'm doing bookkeeping because that's really what bookkeeping is for. Besides making good business decisions, it's to do an accurate tax return because none of us like paying more in taxes than we want to.
That's right. Yeah. And then uh, the EA thing, because that's one of the
Mhm.
questions I was going to ask you. Again,
Yeah.
so you have a bookkeeper, then you have a bookkeeper with the EA. What did you have to do to get that qualification?
So to be an enrolled agent, you have to basically take 3 tests at the IRS and kind of had to go through a pat down, roll up my sleeves. They had to check my glasses, make sure I didn't have a camera on me. So they're very, very protective of that test. And that's because once you take those 3 tests, you've basically proven to them that you have a certain knowledge level. So I also have to do extended continuing education every year. I have to do more hours than someone who just prepares tax returns as a tax preparer with a P10 number. And then when dealing with the IRS, I have extra things that I'm allowed to do. I'm allowed to represent people in front of the IRS. I'm allowed to represent them even if I didn't prepare the tax return.
Oh,
And then it just really gives me a little bit of a leg up when I'm dealing with them too, because they know when they're talking to me that they're talking to someone who knows what they're doing. All around, it's a lifetime certification. I don't have to take a test ever again as long as I keep up with my continuing education, and that's what I plan on doing.
that's awesome. So what's your philosophy or your approach to bookkeeping?
So when it comes to bookkeeping, I know that I'm different from most people as far as I enjoy numbers. I like doing taxes. I like talking about that. Most people, you mention taxes and
I
they just
don't.
cringe. Yeah. I try to really keep that in mind that I know when someone comes to see me with bookkeeping that there's usually a lot of stress involved. And so I really try to take the stress out of that entire scenario so that they're not avoiding it. Because I think that's one of the things that a lot of business owners do because there's so much uncertainty. Well, I don't know exactly. I don't know if I want to know exactly where I'm at. And so they put it off. There's always something else that they'd rather be doing, but that makes sense because they didn't go into business to be a bookkeeper. They went into business to do whatever it is that they do. I try to take all the stress out. I try and provide clarity. I'm compassionate when I do it because I know that sometimes I'm not delivering the best news to someone. So really trying to make the process as painless as possible, but getting it done because that's the most important thing is bookkeeping has to be done on a regular basis if you're going to be a successful business owner. And then I think like if you look at our website, I love the word reconciliation. I think that's probably my favorite word in the English language. And that's because it has so many different connotations and different not just bookkeeping. Bookkeeping, reconciling is making sure one thing matches another, but also kind of helping business owners reconcile with their business, be more comfortable with it not being a burden to them. I try to bring, things back into agreement, into harmony. And that's really, what I feel like I've been placed on this earth to do. This really, for me, is not an occupation so much as it is like a calling, is what I feel like. So, when I'm dealing with clients, I don't want to just, here's your numbers, because that doesn't help somebody if you're just presenting them with numbers. I want my clients to come away with understanding when they're looking at their financial reports, understanding what their next steps need to be. So I really try to provide almost like CFO level services for clients. And typically, you don't get the benefit of a CFO until you're a big business.
Right.
But as soon as you become a business owner, you actually need that guidance. And so I try to do as much of that as possible just to really help my clients succeed.
Yeah, I can't over the years talking to lots of business owners and stuff, and I can't believe how many of them like let's talk about
Hmm.
tradespeople or home service people, small
Hmm.
businesses that um, you know they don't know their numbers. You know what I mean? They say I have money in my bank account every month, and then it seems like it's gone. And as soon as I hear something like that, like you need to get yourself a good bookkeeper and accountant or something because
It's true.
if you don't know where your money's going, that's a problem.
And a lot of times, it's, hey, I've done so much money, I've billed so much. Why is there no money in the account? Or why am I not able to pay myself a regular salary? Or, oh my gosh, I thought I was going to have enough money set aside to pay taxes and I don't. And those are all things that with good bookkeeping, you can prevent a lot of that frustration because you can prepare. And so again, that's one of the things like when I do tax returns that is so frustrating because by the time somebody sees me to do their tax return, the year's done. There's nothing that I can do to go back and correct things. I can't go back and tell them to set money aside for certain things. But doing a bookkeeping, especially if you're doing it on a regular basis like it's supposed to be done, then you can take those steps one at a time. And then at the end of the year, it's not a big stressful event because you already know what to expect on the tax return. It should not be like, oh my goodness, that's not what I thought it would be. And I think unfortunately a lot of business owners have that experience every tax time where they're shocked at the
Right.
results. So
And you're so right. And something that actually something you said at one of our meetings that kind of stuck out for me is um, there's a difference between two things. One, there's a difference between someone who's doing your books and someone that's
mhm.
doing your taxes. Because
Yes.
sometimes someone might just do books and not do see, I didn't really think about that.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. So you want to make sure you have somebody that is good at both of them. Excuse me. And then the next thing is just what you just said about um, if you have your bookkeeper and they're doing their job right, there shouldn't be any surprises at tax time because you should be planning on stuff. Should I buy that extra truck or should I wait till
Yes.
next year?
Right.
Um, things like
Yeah.
that. So that's the two things. So two, one, and that's what you talk about because you're both. And I hadn't thought about that before too. Is so being good at both. Why that's a benefit to a business owner. And then two, if you have a good bookkeeper, they should really be helping you prepare for your taxes.
Yeah, and unfortunately, in our industry, um, usually in the past, the only time where you could ever really get bookkeeping and taxes in the same building, even, is by going through a CPA. But nowadays, a lot of CPAs are doing taxes only. They won't do the
Oh,
bookkeeping also, or they will sub it out to someone else because they're overwhelmed. Because as an industry, there aren't enough bookkeepers and tax preparers. And then when you have tax preparers that don't do anything with bookkeeping except, like, oh, you don't have your records together, I'll add up your receipts. Well, adding up your receipts is like step one. That's not the complete picture.
yeah.
And most bookkeepers, that's all they do is bookkeeping. So there really is just industry wide, there's a huge disconnect. And that's one of the reasons why I went out on my own and actually started the business because I was tired of being in that position where I was having to deliver bad news to clients come tax time, that could have been avoided
Yeah.
and missed opportunities if I had been doing their bookkeeping year round. So I really enjoy doing that because I know that that is going to make a huge impact for that person. And that's one of the reasons too. My sister and I are almost interchangeable. I'm a little bit more gregarious than she is. But she likes doing a lot of the repetitive, like the monthly things, the analytics, because she has a background when it comes to data analysis. I love doing the messy cleanup jobs, the things that most, business owners are going to be like, oh, no one's going to want to take on this mess, this huge box of receipts, or, I tried doing this on my own and I think I made a huge mess of it. I love those. That's what I live for. It's like untangling a big mathematical knot. And then when you see what it looked like before, what it looked like, and then you get to deliver these numbers to a client and they just kind of, that is like that's what I live for. So,
I love that about you too. Because again, I can tell your passion, and when I listen to you talking to other people and stuff, it's just that. But the thing is again the books. We have a business consultant in the groups, and he's been doing it for 4 years. But the first year or so, I asked him what was his biggest aha moment or something, and he says, that, and he has a number background too. He was a CEO of a multi-million dollar company, $23 million company. Anyway, but he says he has a lot of here in the valley and around the country, and he says it's their books. He goes, so many small businesses, their books are a mess. They can't tell, job costing zero. Anyway, and that's why I love people like you because to run a business right, you got to have your books in order. Because you could you could be having your best year ever with new customers, but if you're losing money on your customers or making such a thin margin, you can't pay your people, you can't pay anyway, you know that too. I'm sure you see that a lot from companies.
I do. In fact, I actually think that probably the number one mistake that I see for new business owners specifically is not getting a bookkeeper. And I completely understand it because when you're,
We're
yeah,
going about my first year. When I bought this franchise, I was like, I burned the boats. I wanted to. I was doing some sales consulting, and I told push people away. So I was like on, um, working really hard to get money coming in. You know what I mean? And I didn't
yes.
have a bookkeeper the first year, but I'm telling you, and again, it's like that. But I'm telling you that it was also probably a big mistake too because I just wasn't keeping track of stuff like I needed to.
And I mean, I completely get it because you start your business, you have basic expenses that you know you're going to have to
Yeah.
do, and I think a lot of people focus on marketing and getting the sales, and that's fine. That's what you're supposed to be doing, but they don't want to spend more than they absolutely have to, and so they don't invest in things like getting a really good bookkeeper, and so they do it themselves. And what I find is first of all, people don't understand, like, number one, what should a bookkeeper cost you? And just industry standard. Your bookkeeping expenses typically fall somewhere between 1 and 3% of your gross sales for the year. Now, a lot of bookkeepers like myself, we do have minimums. So, there's still things that I can do, like maybe, and this is where I don't like to say a la carte, but I do like to do whatever I can to help new business owners. So maybe they are not making enough, especially in the first year, to have somebody doing their monthly bookkeeping because there just isn't enough to do yet. But I can do things like have a consultation with them. I can set up their QuickBooks online so that it is ready to go for them. I can do training and show them this is how you need to keep track of things, this is what you need to keep track of. We can do just quarterly meetings so that I can give them, like, hey, I looked at your P&L and I see some things on there that don't look right, and we can make some course corrections. And then I could just do, the end of year. So we're not doing like committing to a monthly fee,
Right.
but we're still helping them so that they don't get too far off course. And then when they get to the point that they can afford a monthly bookkeeper, then I'm already there. But 1 to 3% is kind of industry standard. And you think like, oh, I don't want to spend that extra money. But when you think about how many hours is that business owner spending trying to do their own books?
Yep.
And a lot of them, I mean, we're talking, especially when you're not familiar with the software, because that's not what you do. You might be doing 10 hours, 20 hours, 40 hours a month. Well, how much more money could you be making if you had that time freed up so that you could go out and do things, plus you also had good data to know what client to chase, what not to spend money on. Or maybe it's just about work-life balance because a lot of new business owners, they burn out because they're trying to do
Yep.
everything. And this is like the number one thing that you should sub out before anything else is your bookkeeping. Especially because when we think about time, we've got limited resources when we're a new owner, limited money, but most of all, limited time. You only have so much time. You can't buy more. You have to use it wisely. And trying to do your own books a lot of time is a big time waster in general, especially when you're not getting great results because that's not what you specialize in.
Right.
So I think by at least talking to someone in the beginning, getting professional advice so that you're making the right steps, that's going to help businesses last longer, make it to the point where they're successful because they don't make these big mistakes up front, get
Right.
frustrated, and then quit.
And that's the thing I think sometimes too is businesses don't look at is sometimes you guys can pay for yourselves because by
Mhm.
maybe by doing some job costing or something, you figure out, hey, you need to raise your prices over here. And
Mhm.
so, wow, right there. Or like going from an LLC to an S-Corp.
Yeah.
Um, I can't tell you how many people have told me that their accountant for years and years didn't say anything, and
Mhm.
then all of a sudden they're making $200,000 a year, and they're giving a bunch. Anyway, they're paying taxes they wouldn't have to pay if they would have
Yes.
just fill out some paperwork and be an S corp, and that can
And
only be
again,
done
yeah.
having someone like you kind of kind of um, kind of giving them a heads up.
Exactly. And again, that's the disconnect between a bookkeeper and a tax preparer because if they're working independent, a lot of times even that's not something that most bookkeepers would know to tell you, hey, you should really change your business structure. A CPA would, but if all you're doing is seeing them during tax time, they have hundreds of clients that they're trying
Yeah.
to do in a very short period of time. They're just going to get the tax return done. If you want that extra advice, that's going to cost you. And so that's where there's a disconnect where you can fall in that kind of gap in between those two roles and then huge savings when it comes to taxes when you're able to pay yourself a regular salary. When you become an S corp, you can do that. You can pay yourself as an employee and then shift some of those, tax expenses to the business. And then there's all other kind of perks, contributions into a retirement plan. I mean, there's so much more. And that's one of the things, the number one excuse or thing that I hear really from clients, and this goes for bookkeeping and taxes, is I didn't know.
Yeah.
And when it comes time to taxes, I don't know or I didn't know is not a valid excuse with the IRS or
Yeah.
the state of Idaho for that matter. And so that's one of those things that what you don't know really can hurt you. And so you have to seek out that knowledge. And unfortunately, there is, the internet's great because you can look up a lot of things, but there's so much bad information or incomplete information
Right.
when you're talking about taxes and bookkeeping online, because they're normally attached to some kind of, sales. They want you to have them do your taxes or you to have them, do your bookkeeping. And it's the devil's in the details when it comes to tax
Yep.
returns. Does it say and or? Is it a refundable tax credit or a non-refundable tax credit? So those tiny little things can change the entire picture. And so that's where you really need someone that you can, call and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think?" And that person can say, "Well, this isn't a good idea for this reason," or "This is
Right.
a great idea. Let's talk about it." So it really is the I don't know is one of those things I try to clear that up as much as possible because I want my clients to know. And then what they don't know, that's why we have those ongoing meetings so that as I see things, I can mention them to them and then they can make an informed decision from there.
So what do you think, like a business starting off,
Mhm.
one, you already said, get a bookkeeper, right? Even if
Mhm.
you, like you said, even and if you have to do, because you're really skimping, so
Mhm.
they get you to help them, quarterly or something, right? But anyway,
Right.
so that's the first thing. But what do you see overall, um, besides not hiring a bookkeeper, like you see businesses that maybe have been in business for a year or two, like what the biggest mistakes they're making versus somebody who's been in business like for 10 years. And someone who's been in business for 10 years,
Mhm.
what are some mistakes you've seen kind of coming in and, you know, do you see any patterns?
So there really is a point where you can get to the size where maybe you really do need someone full-time working for you as a bookkeeper. The only downside that I see to that sometimes is then that person is working for you as an employee, whereas I'm working with you hopefully as a partner. So that gives me a little bit more um, well, let me put it this way. I can say the things that they don't want to hear. And honestly,
Yep, yep,
I have no problem doing that if it's what's need if I need to say it, because again, I don't, I'm not worried about like, oh, I don't want to make my boss mad. I don't want to, if I say something to someone, I'm going to say it as respectfully and sympathetically as I can. But they need that information to make a good decision.
right,
And sometimes an employee does not feel comfortable doing that because that's their boss. They don't want to make their boss mad. They don't want to, mess with things. Is that really, and that again, that's someone doing your bookkeeping for you as an employee versus someone more in a CFO where it's, kind of leader to leader. Okay, we need to do this or we need to make this decision
right.
because again, you might have somebody entering all your bills and stuff, but maybe you don't want them purview to everything. You don't want them to know how much your business is making as a whole, or you don't
Right.
want them to know how much you're taking home an hour because they don't, you don't want to create some kind of resentment. So, again, it's good to have someone on the outside. I totally understand when you get to a certain point, sometimes it makes more sense to have someone in house, and that's completely fine. But I think the number one thing that I see with business owners is a lack of maybe understanding that keeping your books is not optional.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are like, I'll get to it. No, they have to be done. That's a legal requirement when you're talking about doing your taxes. Even as someone preparing a book for books for someone, or even a tax return for someone, I have a legal responsibility that I am doing things correctly. Using bookkeeping standards, that I'm not just moving things around where it sounds good. And so there's a lot of responsibility when it comes to your bookkeeping, and they really do need to be current. I mean, a lot of people will kind of put it off and then maybe at the end of the year, come tax time, they'll do them then. Well, with them not being current, there's so many missed opportunities and, things that you could have fixed so much longer ago. So they really do need to be current, and they're not optional. They have to be done. And I think a lot of times the weight of that doesn't really sink in with a lot of,
Well,
especially new business owners, because they're just doing business.
yep.
You know what I mean?
But well, I'm telling you,
Yeah.
I've heard this over and over again, is that bankers can't give a loan because their
Yes.
books are a mess. It's like
Yes.
we can't tell how much money you made, or they say, "Oh, I'm making a lot of money," but they look and they go, "Oh, according to your taxes, you made zero money last year."
Exactly.
And so it's like that's anyway. That's another thing that I
Mhm.
business owners don't understand is that when it comes to getting funding, I over and over and over again that banks go their biggest reason that they can give it or it delays it is because um, their books are a mess
And that's true.
and their
We're
taxes too.
all, yeah, we're trying to, get business, and that big sweet job finally lands in your lap, but you need a loan. And that's fine. The fact that you need a loan to do that job doesn't mean that you failed in some respects. There really are some of those huge opportunities that come along that are going to really kind of take you from one level to the next level, and you might need a loan. But in order to have those, you have to have, financial reports, tax returns. And so those are things that if you're just scrambling at that moment to get those done, you're probably going to have a bad surprise. Even when they do get done and you hand those in, they're going to look at them and go, okay, your profit margin is horrible. Whereas if you'd been doing your books all along and fixing little, making little corrections along the way, by the time that opportunity comes, you call your bookkeeper and say, hey, I need to get a loan. And a good, bookkeeper like me is going to say, I know exactly what you need, and I'm going to print all the reports they
Well, that's
need. I
awesome.
will discuss it with them ahead of time so that they're prepared. If the banker brings something up, they're not going to be like, oh my goodness. And then they can present it to the banker, got the loan, they're now at the next level. So it's not sometimes, I know a lot of people think about when you're doing bookkeeping, you're trying to minimize like wasteful spending. Where's my money going? Am I charging enough for this job? But good bookkeeping is also what takes you to that next level. So, missed opportunities. And I think that's one of those things, again, that can devastate a business owner if they have this huge opportunity and they miss out on it because they didn't have their books together.
Yep.
So I don't like people to go through those experiences because they're disheartening, and I completely get that. I'm one of those. I hit a little bump in the road, and I'm bummed for like a day. So I kind of want to keep the motivation going.
Well, this has been great. I think we're gonna have to do a follow-up
Oh, thank you.
because there's just so much. But I mean, this is great because again, this is when you say about business owners, I'm the perfect example of a business owner that I hate the books, but
Hmm.
I need them. You know what I mean? But I hate.
Yeah.
I'm not. I just that's just not my thing. I like to do podcasts and meet people and get people together and help them do stuff. But um, at the end of the day, all the stuff we talked about, and then like the last thing is for a business owner, if you're going to grow your business, you're going to need a loan sooner
Yeah. I think that really is a
or, or
reality
or an
for.
opportunity to buy another business, maybe an opportunity that's a really short window, and your books are
Yeah.
such a mess, you don't get it because um, because the bank says we can't figure out how much money you make.
I know. And that's the thing is, how much, again, like you said, most business owners, they don't know where they're at. They may think that they're doing really great and working hard. And then when I do the numbers, it turns out that they're only making $20 an hour
Yep.
and they're actually paying the people under them more than what they're earning. Well, that's a problem. No wonder you're frustrated.
Yeah.
So there's so many opportunities, I think is the right word when it comes to the bookkeeping. It doesn't have to be a horrible experience. It doesn't have to be something that, is, oh my gosh, I have to call my bookkeeper. It
Yeah.
should be just another day, another task to do, and
Yep.
then boom, now I can move on to what I do best.
That's awesome. Well, this has been great. Hey,
Thanks.
and I'll have all your contact information in the show notes, but what's the
Okay.
way to get a hold of you?
Typically the best way to get hold of me, you can actually schedule a free consultation on our website.
Oh, okay.
I do free consultations for business owners. And again, I do have some minimums, but I'm probably one of the only bookkeepers that will do like the quarterly only or just the business setup. If it's a small business owner, it doesn't matter how big or small you are. I would love to talk to you. So website is dutchsistersbooks.com. And then right on the front page is where you can schedule a consultation.
Awesome. Like I said, I'll make sure I get that in the show notes. This has been great,
Okay,
and we'll have to do a
thank you.
follow up to this because there's just a lot of stuff that business owners need to know. That
And there'll be tax things changing, we know, this year
oh
and
yeah,
next
oh
year.
yeah,
So
oh
there's
yeah,
always lots to talk about.
oh yeah. Well, yeah. So perfect. Hey,
All
well,
right.
thanks everybody, and appreciate everybody listening to another episode of Treasure Valley NA Quick Tips. And until next time, thanks everybody.